topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to Leadership for Life with Gina Gardner on W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV. Join your host, who is a multiple #1 international best-selling author, motivational speaker, empowerment and transformational leadership coach and trainer. She's the founder of Genuinely-You and has 30 years experience of helping people step into their genuine, authentic power. And now, here is Gina Gardner, your host of Leadership for Life.
Hello there, and a huge welcome to Leadership for Life. I am so thrilled today to be able to have Craig Goldblatt as my guest later on. The whole program is going to be about impact and what impact you make in the world. And Craig is a guy who's made a huge impact in the world, and I'm very pleased to be able to call him my friend. So, have a think about it. What sort of impact are you making in the world? Because make no mistake, you are making an impact. Everything you say or do, every action you take or fail to take, the way in which you speak, who you speak to, when you speak to them, how you speak to them, or if indeed you speak to them at all of the choices we make moment by moment have an impact on the world. And those of you that have listened to the show before will know that I talk about the living legacy. You know, I was talking to a client this morning, and she was talking about the relationship that she has with her sister. And she's a younger sister. And all of the time that she was talking about the way in which her sister spoke to her and about her to other people were having a huge impact on the client's emotional state. Now, of course, what impact you allow other people to have on you is entirely your choice. People can't make you unhappy or uncomfortable or feel small or feel good unless you give them permission. But most of the time, we don't even think about it. We give them permission without recognizing consciously that that's what we do. And when we talked about the fact that she knew her sister loved her, that her sister was always engaged in one-upmanship. Whatever she did, her sister had done it better, bigger, sooner, more powerfully, according to the sister, of course. And it made my client feel less than adequate. Now, the reality is that when we started to unpick what was going on, that she was doing a grand job. And her sister's conversation to her and to other people about her was not about her at all. In reality, it was all designed to make her sister feel so much better. I want you to think about the interactions that you've had in the last couple of days. How often have those interactions been affected by how that person makes you feel on a regular basis? Habitually, we recreate the same thinking over and over again. And because we do that, we recreate the same actions, the same language, the same responses. It puts us very firmly into reactive mode and therefore into victim mode if you're not very careful. But just think about, have you cooked breakfast this morning or cooked lunch? Have you been in your kitchen at all? And if so, what are the actions that you've taken? And think about the impact that that has on the world. So how much plastic have you used? And was it one-time plastic or was it reusable plastic? Have you eaten food that's good for you or eaten food that actually is not being very kind to yourself because it's full of fat or sugar or additives? Have you thought about the ingredients in your food? You know, has it got palm oil, and is that palm oil from a sustainable source or from a source where they've just burnt down rainforests in order to make the farmer an income? You know, we could drive ourselves mad. But ultimately, if you are not conscious of the decisions that you're making and the choices that you make on a moment by moment basis, the chances are that you are having an impact in the world that is bigger than you realize. You've heard me, if you've watched the show, say so many times, if you think that you can't make much of an impact on things, just think about the power that a mosquito has. If you're in the bedroom at night and you've got a mosquito in the bedroom whining away, it keeps you awake, and it can certainly sting you and bring you up in a great big bump. And that's a tiny, tiny thing. But how do you speak to your children or your partner or your team members? Do you speak in a way that empowers them and makes them feel good and feel that anything's possible? Or are you very critical and you're constantly telling them what they can't do and how they're not good enough? That's your choice. Every choice, everything you do, moment by moment, from the moment you are opening your eyes in the morning until you go to sleep, you actually have a conscious choice if you choose to use it. But many people don't. I want you to think about the choices that you make in terms of the voices that you listen to. Now, I'm not talking about you being schizophrenic, but I am talking about that voice in your head. Is that voice in your head empowering you and saying to you, yeah, you can do that, well done, keep going, or you can do better than that? Or is that a naggy, negative voice that's always putting you down and telling you that you should have done this and you shouldn't have done that and you're useless? Because ultimately, that voice in your head determines how empowered, how much you step into your genuine power, or how much you feel a victim. And you do have control over that. Everything is your responsibility within your life, unless you're very small or you're completely incapacitated. And when you take radical responsibility, and I mean radical responsibility for your actions, your words, or lack of them, then life takes on a very different feel. Because ultimately then, instead of being reactive, as I've said, you are in control of you. And the reality is, that's the only thing you can control. We like the semblance of believing that we can control our lives. And of course, many people try and do that. I've had a number of clients who've had OCD, for example. And in their trying to control their environment, they're trying to control the quality of their life. But of course, it has exactly the opposite effect than the one that they intend. Control is an illusion. And when you start to surrender to life, and I don't mean give up, but I mean recognize that life is happening for you rather than to you, then life takes on a completely different quality. Now, we're going to have a short break in a moment. And after the break, I'm going to introduce Craig to you. And he's a guy with a really interesting background. And he has so much to offer in terms of helping people have a positive impact in life. So don't go away. Straight after the break, we're going to talk to Craig. See you in a moment.
You have been listening to Gina Gardner on Leadership for Life. We'll be back after this quick break. Want to get the best out of life personally and professionally? Are you ready to step into a life which excites and fulfills you? Well, the right place for you is Leadership for Life with Gina Gardner on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. We will share with you stories from inspiring people, a wide range of guest experts, and lots of practical strategies to help you get the very best out of your personal and professional life. Leadership for Life is a radio and TV show focused on helping you live a happier, more successful, and fulfilling life. Join international best-selling author, motivational speaker, empowerment and transformational leadership coach and trainer, Gina Gardner, live every Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Become the leader of your own life. Gina Gardner's #1 international best-selling book, Thriving Not Surviving, The 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success, and Fulfillment, provides you with the foundational principles on which to become the best leader of your own life. It's available as an ebook, paperback, hardback, and as an audio from genuinely-u.com, or also from Amazon. Every one of the principles have been proven to work for the countless people who have used them, including the author. Now, let's put them to work for you. If you're ready to discover your true leadership life design, accelerate your journey with an invitation to join Gina for Leadership for Life VIP Day. Choose your journey of self-discovery where Gina will help you navigate your way to happiness, success, and fulfillment. To find out more, email gina@genuinely-u.com. Welcome back to Leadership for Life. Here is your host, Gina Gardner.
Hi there. Let me tell you a little bit about Craig. Passionate about global change, Craig Goldblatt inspires us to contribute beyond ourselves for greater good. He wholeheartedly believes that as we grow ourselves, we naturally impact upon others. He's delivered over 700 keynote presentations on 5 continents to hundreds of thousands worldwide. For over 2 decades, Craig has been changing lives with his powerful message. With his ability to challenge rather than tell, he rouses audiences to take action and to become their best selves. So without more ado, I'd like to introduce Craig Goldblatt.
Hi, Gina.
Hello there. Thanks so much for joining me today.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You. So come on, how do you come to speak on 5 continents to thousands of people? How did you get here? Tell us the story.
Well, thank you for the question. I was born in South Africa. I'm now 49 years of age, and I grew up doing some business diplomas, and then I went on the road selling capital equipment for the corporate organisations here in the UK. And I always say that I was promoted to the level of incompetence because as I became good at developing salespeople, I got promoted a little bit, and then they put me behind a desk and asked me to look at the strategic side of the operation and tactical implementation and look at budgets, and that just wasn't me. I realized later in my 20s, Gina, that my only true gift in business was in communication, and what I was great at was developing the sales guys. And so by the time I was 29 years of age, I made a decision to leave the corporate world, and at that stage, I had no idea that professional speaking existed or even training existed outside of the corporate world. And I went on some courses and was very fortunate to attend some great conferences. And then just before I was 30 years of age, I found myself on the European circuit. And I started speaking on basic development, such as how to plan and prepare yourself and how to introduce yourself effectively, how to ask great questions, how to present with integrity and power and passion, and how to build a great pipeline and a great network, and to develop your own personal business within your organization. And I was just working with sales teams on basic stuff. And then I started studying neuro-linguistic programming, that I know is close to your heart. And I started studying language and our emotional needs psychology. And in my early 30s, I became really passionate about human potential. And it was the first time in my life that I really started to introspect internally rather than look at our skills externally. And that gave me a real springboard to start speaking at more national conferences and then overseas. And for the first 5 years of my 30s, I was a road warrior, and I just ran all over the place, delivering as many speeches as I could. And then in my mid-30s, I was burnt out and I was tired, and I needed to stop for a second and really take stock of my life. And my mum passed away when I was 18, and when I was in my mid-30s, I started introspecting about mum's death and what was important to me at a level of purpose. And And I started chatting to my dad about what's important in life, because for 17 years I was just working. I was doing, I was fortunate enough to have a great life, but I spent a lot of my time working. And so I went and visited some remote communities, one being an actual community in the heart of the Ecuadorian part of the Amazon forest. And I was able to go and learn a little bit in India, and I was really lucky. And in my mid-30s, I started learning much more about international development and charity. And so that allowed me to start a school, help with a school, to build a school building and different projects for 800 kids in West Africa. And we started a little charity, and that was about 11 years ago. And so I guess, that really taught me a lot more about cultural diversity and how we tick. So by that point, when I was in my late 30s, I was speaking to leadership teams a lot more and really understanding our sense of intention, purpose, our identity, our beliefs and values. And so for the last 20 years, Gina, I've, like you gave me that wonderful introduction, the last 20 years of my work life has been dedicated really to supporting people to understand that they are enough and to love themselves more. So that's a potted history. I don't know how long that introduction was, but
Don't worry about it.
That was a 3-4 minute rant about my background. There you go.
I think it's really important, though, for people to have an understanding of where the journey, because
Yes.
so often people see what they believe is the finished product, although I don't think we're ever a finished product. We're all a lifelong student of learning. Because I think so many people think that it happens instantly, and they don't recognize that there's all of this that goes on in the background before people come out to recognize their purpose, and they start to work on that. And I've met so many people who are frustrated because they want the instant success. And so often instant success takes you a decade to get there, doesn't it?
Yes, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And it's, I think it's the success these days, I guess, with all of our tools for a lot of people can come quite quickly. But I think our sense of purpose, as you well know, it's kind of like the physical world is moving so quickly and the spiritual world is a slower climb, isn't it? It's so there's kind of two paradigms that we always try to meet in the middle, and sometimes there's a bit of a war between our spiritual side and our human side.
I think there is, but I do believe that we are moving. Well, I think things are polarized. I think there are those people who are recognizing that they are on a spiritual journey, who hitherto that's not been part of their consciousness at all, and who are interested in exploring who they are spiritually and wanting to make a positive difference in the world. And there are those who, at the other end of the spectrum, are absolutely convinced that they're right and everybody else is wrong, and they'll trample over anybody to get what they want. And we live in very interesting times, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we live, and I've always had a propensity towards having my glass half full, which I think is a gift. I've been very lucky. I always try and see the positives in everything, and sometimes that's to my detriment, or I find myself living in a bit of a bubble. But I think we are definitely in very interesting times. There's no doubt about that.
I too am a glass half full person, and interestingly, they've done a lot of research which shows that people who are naturally optimistic do better in life. They're healthier, they're more successful at every level. And I think it's interesting, people's definition of success, but they are also much more likely to have a good relationship with themselves.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with that. And I think there's one thing that is my experience of being able to be around lots of people as you have over particularly the last 20 years, is I think there's one thing that fascinates me about ourselves is that I used to think that we were born, at age 0 as a newborn baby. And now I've realized that we're over 200,000 years old, each and every one of us, and that our genetics bring an enormous amount of wisdom. And even though we have interesting journeys and pain and suffering and difficulty and loss during this human life that we have, I think what helps me to be so positive is to realize that life is such a gift. It's like just the fact that I'm born at all is one in many millions. To be the fact that I've been born with freedom in this age, in this time in history, is one in millions. To be born with an opportunity and the resources that I have around me is one in millions. And to be here today, and so I've already won the lottery many times over when I was born. And I think that's a really important psychology, that we come here on this planet, on this Earth's plane, with an unbelievable amount of wisdom. And just for our eyes to work, our ears, our sensory acuity, our senses, our physiological structure is genius. Our mind is phenomenal. I mean, apparently, we compute more in a day than the Hubble telescope has done in decades. And, there's these amazing attributes that we've naturally been given through our birthright. And I think that's the most important foundation that we have to be able to love ourselves, knowing that we've got this opportunity of life.
I think you're absolutely right. And if you think, how far we've come from those first amoeba-like creatures that have populated the earth. But I think with that comes a responsibility. That, we have this gift of life. What are we going to do with it?
Yes.
And one of the things for me, if you like, the latest part of my journey has been the recognition that I think we're wrongly named as a species. I think we should be known as human doings and not human beings. And one of the things that I've struggled with is to recognize my beingness, because I've always been told as a child, go and do something useful. I've used work as a great panacea when I've not been happy or I've been in physical pain. And recognizing our spiritual selves as a being rather than a doing, I think has been a really big step for me. And it's very much a work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, it's very complicated, I guess, this stuff, Gina, but how I understand it to be true is, and I know I'm generalizing greatly when I say this, is that for some reason, human beings, we're so clever, we're so calculated from a mindset perspective that we've created an environment where we need certain control. And so we've put in place over the last few thousand years, I guess, all of these different standards and rules that mean that we need to conform perspective and a personal perspective. And that takes us away from being. We've created an external environment that's so stimulating, that allows our brains to be so reactive. And so we become more and more human doings and less human beings. And so the one advice that I give to myself with this, to be more being rather than doing, is for me, of course, to learn to meditate more, and for me to learn to sit and be patient more. But what's really powerful, I think, with this particular piece is our environment and the people that we spend our life with. So there's 3 things, I think, that make the biggest difference to our sense of leadership and our sense of being. Number 1 is Anthony Robbins, our friend, the wonderful speaker from the States, told me this 20 years ago. Who we spend our life with is who we become. So if we want to be more, we have to hang around with people that are in that place of spirituality and in that place of rest and reflection and introspection. We need to be around people that understand stillness. The second thing is, I think it's what we read, because I think our words on a page become hypnotic. And I think if we read social media or if we engage in so much visual stimulation, it takes our mind to a place of conditioning, so much so that our brain actually is, our functionality of our brain allows us to move faster and faster and more into doing and less away from being. And the third is to be with nature, because we're not in nature, we are nature. And so Dalai Lama says, go somewhere every year where you've never been. And even if it's for 3 or 4 days, to be in a space where you cannot use your phone. You can't access the World Wide Web. You cannot access the tube or the, you know, so I think to force ourselves into an environment where this is taken away from us is ever so powerful.
I think that's absolutely true. And, you know, when you go into a different environment, and you don't have to spend a lot of money to do that, you can just go into a park that you've never been, or go for a walk along the coastline or wherever. I think we're so conditioned that we have to be entertained.
Absolutely.
That when that's not there, we don't know what to do.
No, sorry, I interrupted you. Absolutely. Or go and grab a tent, you know, or a bivouac and go camping. Do you know, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be cost a fortune and get on an expensive aircraft. It's about being in nature. Absolutely.
You know, I've often talked to parents about children learning very early on that they need to be entertained, and not being able to organize themselves and to actually spend time with themselves. And you see very tiny babies these days on electronic gizmos, and they know how to swipe left to right and right to left and so on, up and down. But then if you take those same children and you take them into a wood or a forest, or you take them into a natural place, and I'm talking about more than just a park where the grass is cut. I'm talking about them being able to walk through knee-length grass and to touch the trees and get muddy. There is a qualitative change in the way those children then respond when they come back into the real world.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, I'm learning still now at 49 years of age that I don't need to I mustn't just put myself in nature. I am nature. I'm built of 30 trillion cells in my body that are no different from a quantum physics perspective to a tree or the ocean. And we're just nature, right? We're just an animal, and we belong in nature. And that's it. There's no way around that. We are nature. And so what just came to me as you were sharing there, Gina, is I just asked myself a question in my head, which is, you know, it's all very well me sharing, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this, but we're creatures of conditioning. And by the time we reach, you know, neuroscientists tell me that by the time we're 35 years of age, we are 90% conditioned. You know, our brain is full. And so how do we change ourselves as a human being? How do we really, really change? And I think there's 2 ways I've been told that human beings really change when we're adults, not when we're 7, because when we're 7 years old or 9 years old, we have such creativity and openness to be able to have a go. I think when we're older, we get stuck. And so there's 2 ways, I think, and this is talking a little bit about the chemistry of our brain, but in essence, apparently there's only 2 ways we can really change ourselves when we're an adult. One is through intensity and the other one's trauma. And so we change through an intense experience, or we change through a traumatic experience. And we hear so much about people having a heart attack and then they put down the bacon sandwich and the beer and you know, the cigarettes or whatever it is. And as human beings, in a way, we have to change. Like when we go to the gym and we lift a heavy weight, our muscles have to tear to be able to then heal and grow. And that, for some reason, we've been built this way, that either we have to suffer to change or struggle to change or have difficulty, or we have to have an intense experience. So allow me just for a couple of minutes to explore that, because what is intensity? Well, intensity is sitting listening to the, you know, at the Royal Opera House. It's watching a prima ballerina. It's watching two children play in the park, or it's going bungee jumping, or jumping out of a plane, or it's going swimming in a cold ocean. It doesn't have to be, again, you know, cost an enormous amount of money, or it's an amazing kiss or an amazing hug, but we need intensity to change. And so we have to put ourselves in a learning environment, internally or externally, where we have a shock, a good shock or a bad shock, and we have to have difference in our lives. Because without that, we can stay conditioned to somewhere we don't want to be. So I always say that in a good way or bad way to change, we have to have intensity in our lives.
It's an interesting concept, and I think I understand where you're coming from, but I also believe that part of this is that if people really want to change, if they recognize that their life is not how they want it to be,
Yes,
and they have a desire to change,
yes.
And I suppose, in a sense, that moment where you decide, actually, it's not what I want. I suppose that in itself is an intense event.
Absolutely, it is. And I think when we're consciously aware of it, we look for opportunities to have that moment. In other words, please let me share this. One of the most intense experiences of my life was becoming vegan. And 6 years ago, I went from a South African meat eater on the barbecue, you know, everything was meat, for 43 years of my life, to not becoming a vegetarian, but becoming a vegan, you know, overnight. And I've never eaten meat or dairy since. And that's because I watched it. I'm not judging when I say this, because I loved meat. So I'm not saying to all of our viewers here, you know, to live healthy, we have to be vegan, although that's a belief of mine that's strong, that it does help us become more healthy. But I'm not judging anybody with their dietary choices. What I'm saying is, I happened, for me, to realize years ago that it wasn't right for me to eat meat. And Gina, I watched Cowspiracy, I watched that film, and in one moment, I saw this duck being slaughtered on the screen, and I know it's a bit graphic. I don't apologise, but I apologise that I saw the blood coming out of this animal's neck, and it gave me a shock. I was sitting on a sofa, really comfortable at home, and it was intense, and it changed my life, that moment. So, you know, I was just watching a film. So intensity can be a moment of beauty, or a moment of saying, I do, or it's over. So you're absolutely right in my eyes. It doesn't have to be jumping out of a plane. It can be more subtle than that.
You know, it's interesting how, and going back to the conditioning thing, how many people say, I'm working on that. And they say, yeah, I've had an aha moment and I'm working on that. And for a month, they might do whatever it is. But then life gets stressful, and then they immediately revert back to old patterns of being.
Yes.
And I think that what you're talking about in terms of the level of intensity is it needs to be strong enough to act as the antidote when life gets stressful and you want to go back to that old pattern. Because I think our brains are rather like a vinyl record that's got stuck. You go round and round in that same circle.
We have to be comfortable. We like to be comfortable.
Yes. Well, and yet so often we're comfortable in our discomfort, aren't we?
Absolutely.
That it's not uncomfortable enough. We don't like it, but it's not uncomfortable enough to force us to do something drastic to change it.
No, absolutely. And these changes that we're talking about, intensity, where do they come from? Where do you see somebody? What's the trigger that helps one person to make these changes? And another one of us to sit in discomfort or not make a change. And so I know we don't have much more time this afternoon to be able to explore this right now, but if I can just give one more thing to this is,
yes, please.
My sense as I get older, and maybe this is just me, but it seems that a lot of people I talk to have this, element of purpose that we share. And what tends to drive change is the depth of purpose that we have and our legacy, our emotional legacy. And what that means is to go back to what you so rightly shared at the beginning of this interview. We are creatures that have an enormous opportunity to be able to impact no matter how big or small. And our sense of understanding that in every conversation we can make an enormous difference with a smile. And that person could be at 99.999% of a change. And we meet them in Waitrose or in a supermarket somewhere in the world, and we smile at them and really care with our eyes as to how that person is. And that can be the 0.1% that allows them to create a change that has ripples in the pond to such a degree that 20 years later that their change has been graphic. And we're never going to know. So what you said earlier was so profound for me, because, every element of ourselves, we are just energy, and our smile can make a difference. So it's having that intention every day to live with love. And if we have that deep sense of love through our legacy for everybody we share our life with every day, over a period of time, our change for them and us can be graphic.
I think absolutely. I was interviewing a guy who had been brought to the point where he was ready to commit suicide.
Yes.
And he was standing on the side of the motorway, ready to jump in front of the next big truck.
Yes.
He was there and he was ready, and he couldn't see anything to live for.
Right.
And as the truck approached, the driver caught his eye and smiled. And in that second, he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it to the truck driver.
No.
And from that point, he recognized that his life was to do something different.
Yes.
And it was that of value. And that was all in that one split second look from somebody who just caught sight of them on the side of the road. And, I often say to people, you just don't know. The person you smile at in the road may not have spoken to anybody all day or even all week. And small things, seemingly small, can make such a difference.
Make a big difference. That's a really powerful piece, isn't it? When you hear things like that, you recognise that, that I know that was an intense moment for him. But we don't, it's small noticeable differences at the same time sometimes that add up to making a change. So it's we in every moment, even if it's just before our last breath, we can say something that has a profound effect on other people for their legacy and their future.
Absolutely. Now, where can people get hold of you if they'd like to know more about what you do and they would like to work with you?
Oh, thank you very much. Our website is craiggoldblatt.com. And if you look on the website, you'll find our workshops, and our next workshop face-to-face is on September the 21st. And we do a lot of work with regards to coaching, training, and we speak at conferences. And so it's all to be found at craiggoldblatt.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So thank you so much for this opportunity, Gina. I love talking to you. And my biggest problem with talking to Gina is it's now like we've been chatting for 30, 40 minutes, and I do feel that we've covered about 5%.
It always gives us opportunities to talk again. Now, one of the things that we do is we belong to B1G1, Buy One, Give One, which is an amazing organization. And one of the things that I think is so good, well, there's two things, there's lots of things, but they have a separate charity that raises the money to run the charity. So every cent or every penny goes to the projects that they have identified, and they're all vetted, and they've broken it down. So they call it an impact, so that the impacts themselves range from 1 cent to several dollars, or 1 penny to several pounds. But because they're a collective response, they do huge good in the world, and they're designed for businesses. And we always donate on behalf of our guests. So the 4 projects that are on the table at the moment are feeding the hungry, education, helping the environment by reforestation in a way where people can also earn an income from the forest, and helping children in the Ukraine. So which of the 4 would you like us to donate to on your behalf?
Difficult to choose.
I know.
The two right central for me are education and environmental sustainability, because, you know, my sense is I already fortunate enough to work with lots of both. But I think today it'd be great to look at education. So because of what we're talking about, that feels prevalent.
Great. Well, it just remains for me to say a huge thank you for being on the show. It's always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Don't go away. We've still a little bit of the show to go. We'll see you after the break. Thanks, Craig.
You have been listening to Gina Gardner on Leadership for Life. We'll be back after this quick break. Want to get the best out of life personally and professionally? Are you ready to step into a life which excites and fulfills you? Well, the right place for you is Leadership for Life with Gina Gardner on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. We will share with you stories from inspiring people, a wide range of guest experts, and lots of practical strategies to help you get the very best out of your personal and professional life. Leadership for Life is a radio and TV show focused on helping you live a happier, more successful, and fulfilling life. Join international best-selling author, motivational speaker, empowerment and transformational leadership coach and trainer, Gina Gardner, live every Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on W4CY Radio and Talk4 TV. Become the leader of your own life. Gina Gardner's #1 international best-selling book, Thriving Not Surviving, The 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success, and Fulfillment, provides you with the foundational principles on which to become the best leader of your own life. It's available as an ebook, paperback, hardback, and as an audio from genuinely-u.com, or also from Amazon. Every one of the principles have been proven to work for the countless people who have used them, including the author. Now, let's put them to work for you. If you're ready to discover your true leadership life design, accelerate your journey with an invitation to join Gina for Leadership for Life VIP Day. Choose your journey of self-discovery where Gina will help you navigate your way to happiness, success, and fulfillment. To find out more, email Gina at genuinely-u.com. Welcome back to Leadership for Life. Here is your host, Gina Gardner.
Hello there. You know, deciding that you want to take charge of your life, deciding that you want to do something different is the first step. And we talked before the break about it needing to perhaps be something very intense or very traumatic. Well, I'd suggest to you that, you know, if you're going to make a change, then decide to make the change before it is traumatic. Although I recognize that falling down a mountain at the age of 29 was certainly traumatic for me. And it did mean that I changed my life quite significantly. But you don't need to fall down a mountain to do that. One of the things that I recognize is that we often need support and help. And that can be expensive. And that's one of the reasons why I've created a whole stable of intentional journals. meditating, being quiet are two great ways of connecting with yourself and your greater wisdom, your inner wisdom, and with the source power of God or the universe, whatever you choose to call it. But ultimately, intentional journaling is incredibly powerful, as it helps you make that connection with that inner part of you. It helps you look at the internal landscape rather than the external. And it's something that we were talking about before the break, is that ultimately, there's lots of stuff going on externally, but until you start to do the inner journey work, then the progress is going to be limited. So if you go to Amazon, go to Gina Gardner and go to my author page, you'll find that I've created a whole range of different intentional journals. And some of them are specifically for leaders and some for empaths. But there's a range there for people who wouldn't label themselves as a leader or as an empath, that can help you to develop that real conversation with yourself and to move yourself forward. For those of you that are at the beginning of your journey or who want a very different style of book, then Thriving Not Surviving, The 5 Secret Pathways to Happiness, Success and Fulfillment gives you all of the principles and the strategies that I've used myself and that I've used with thousands of other people, and they really work. They share a bit of my story and an insight as to where I've come from and how I've used those strategies. They're easy to put into place. They don't cost you anything. And they really work. And I know they work for me, and that they've worked for the clients that I've used them with, both personal coaching and also in terms of professional life and leadership. Ultimately, if you always do what you've always done, then you're going to continue to get exactly what you have now. But if you want to do something different, it's often so much easier if you have a route map. It's a bit like going on a journey and thinking, well, I want to travel from, I don't know, Salt Lake City to the Grand Canyon, or from London to Edinburgh. And if you've got no map, it's very difficult. If you've got a sat nav that can tell you which way to go, then it can really make your life so much easier and your journey much, much easier. So ultimately, it's up to you what sort of quality of life you have. Einstein's definition of madness was to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. But ultimately, so many of us, and there have been times when I've done it myself, where we just do it harder or more frequently, and we expect it to be different. A great example of that is mums nagging their children to tidy their bedroom. And they use nagging, but it doesn't work. But they keep using the same old nag. So ultimately, if you want life to be different, then you have to put in place the change that you want. Gandhi said, be the change you want in the world. And I was talking to a different client this morning than the one I mentioned at the beginning of the show, and a professional coaching session about what was going on in her work, and how she had spoken several times about how she feels overloaded and how everybody comes to her to sort them out, and that they smile but they don't do anything. And I asked her what she did after she'd said, I'm overloaded and I can't cope. And she said, well, I get on and I do it. And I said, do you recognize that actually you're training people not to believe you? So ultimately, I'm not suggesting that you fall apart, but if you're going to say something needs to be done, then you need to follow it through rather than just going through the motions. So if you want to do more than go through the motions, then there are lots of books to help you on Amazon. Or if you'd rather work on a one-to-one basis, then email me at Gina@genuinely-u.com. That's Gina@genuinely-u.com. And come and work with me on a one-to-one or work with me in a group and make the rest of your life so much more powerful than it is at the moment. So thanks for joining me. Please do let people know. Remember, we give free meals for every 100 people that listen to the show live or as a download. So you can be helping people and making an impact simply by watching the show or listening to it. Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye now.
You have been listening to The Leadership for Life with your host, Gina Gardner. Make sure you tune in to W4CY Radio and Talk 4 TV next Thursday and every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for more Leadership for Life. If you missed any part of this episode or just want to hear or see it again, you can find the archive of the TV show on Talk 4 TV's YouTube channel and the podcast of The Leadership for Life on iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spotify, Amazon Music, and wherever you listen to your podcast.